It's that time of the week again. It's time for Chitchat Across the Palm. This is episode number 812 for April 23rd, 2025, and I'm your host, Alison Sheridan. This week, our guest is the lovely Adam Angst, and I would like to congratulate him on 35 years of Tidbits. That is amazing, because you're only 28, right?
29, but who's counting? I mean,
35 years.
It is one of those shocking numbers.
That's huge.
It's like, how do you end up having done the same thing for 35 years? I don't know. I didn't plan it that way.
Hard work. That's how.
Lack of attention. You just like stop paying attention. You just keep doing things. I don't know. It's a possibility. It's a deep desire. Someone else asked me this the other day. It's like, it's a deep desire to make everyone think like me.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Well, I think you've come a long ways on that. You realize probably more than half of the people who read your work are younger than Tidbits.
No, it's probably the other way around.
Oh, you
actually.
think so?
Oh, yeah. Tidbits has a very is tweaked
Senior?
older. Senior. And the reason is because in 1993, when I wrote the first edition of Internet Starter Kit for Macintosh, all of the examples of like how to subscribe to a mailing list and all that were tidbits, right? And and the book was a huge bestseller and everything, and the Tidbits audience grew radically during that time. So you figure, like, who had enough money and interest and whatnot in the early 90s to have a Mac and be on the internet?
Right. Not that many of us.
I mean, well, you had to be at least in your mid-20s to mid-30s.
And a job.
In a job, right. So basically, I'm still younger, I believe, than most of my readers.
Wow. So you don't get new readers? Well, you will because of this show.
See, there's a problem with the word. It's the reading concept that I think has more or less gone by the wayside.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know about that. I have a lot of friends and a lot of people just read my blog and don't listen to the podcast, and I think that's fine.
When our son was a teenager, he was absolutely befuddled that we could make a living selling ebooks and publishing Tidbits. Just completely could not figure out how this could be because he didn't know anyone who would read, well, anything more or less. So
it seems like newsletters are coming back. In the last 5 years or so, I'm seeing a lot more people saying, no, a newsletter is a way to really connect with people.
Yeah. I mean, I've been saying that forever, basically, because Tidbits has always been email. And I was like, email's where it's at. You control your audience. Like this is not, you're not dependent on Google or, we can talk about search. But it really does, it is a situation in which I think Substack actually kind of came along. I mean, it was multiple factors, but Substack came along when a lot of people were looking for a way to push their content to an audience. The slight problem with blogs, of course, is that people have to come to you, and that doesn't get you the same kind of readership in today's world, I think. And so, people had gotten into the whole social media. That in essence, the social media site would be pushing at everyone, but of course, then you were at the mercy of their algorithm and their horrific policies.
Right. Well, we're actually not here to talk about how awesome Tidbits is, even though it is awesome.
Aww.
Well, we'll talk about an awesome article that you wrote recently. I think you coined this phrase. I haven't heard it called this. You coined the phrase AI answer engines and how you think they're worth trying. So let's kind of get into what you mean by an AI answer engine and what's the genesis of this.
I don't know that I can take credit for it. I mean, the only term which I had never seen before that I coined in this space is we have chatbots, and I for a long time they were separate from the ones that helped you make pictures, and so those I called art bots. Yeah. I'd never seen anyone call them art bots. Answer engines I feel like I've seen around, so I'm not sure I can take any credit for that at all. But nonetheless, yeah. So this is something which. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me and I wonder if it's for you too, that there has been an increasing dissatisfaction with Google over the last few years.
Absolutely. To me, it's gone from something that was just second nature where I went to do everything in terms of search, and then it started to get more and more addy, and now, it's basically forcing their AI engine on me instead of me getting to choose my own. And, sometimes it's useful, but it's been getting a little bit better, I think, but it's not the search engine anymore. It just literally isn't.
That's definitely, kind of what I've heard from a lot of people. My personal dissatisfaction with Google came from a slightly different direction, which was sort of in the midst of the pandemic. Mid 2020 or so. I just it's like I hit a tipping point. I was like, I don't want to be tracked and recorded and monetized. And I understand full well what the trade off is. That, like, this is how Google makes their money, and they're in business to do this, and they do a good job at what they do, generally speaking, et cetera, et cetera. But with everything else that was going on, I was like, I can't deal. Like, I'm done. And it's like I just need to be separated from this from Google search. And so I played around. I tried several other search engines, Ecosia, which Apple had put into one of its search engine list at some point. Obviously, DuckDuckGo, Bing. Didn't like Bing at all. DuckDuckGo is basically based on Bing, and although privacy is the kind of the core of DuckDuckGo, I just never really liked DuckDuckGo either.
Well, it didn't find
Ecosia
stuff.
was terrible. Yeah.
DuckDuckGo was
Yeah.
I felt real clean, but it was like, but I didn't get the answers to my questions.
Precisely. I didn't actually find stuff. And I think that's a lot of Bing. I never found Bing particularly useful either. And then around then, Brave, which does a Chromium browser, a privacy-focused browser, that uses the same underpinnings as Google Chrome. They came out with Brave Search, which was their own search engine. And at first, it relied a little bit on Google. And then as they kind of built their index and sort of figured stuff out, it became more and more independent. And Brave Search was pretty good, and I liked it. And so, like, this is my way of saying, okay, fine, I've divested myself a little bit from my dependence on Google. And I did that for a couple of years, and then at some point, kind of early last year, 2024, I just, like, I felt like the wasn't that Brave Search was giving me bad results. Like, the results met my search, but what I was reading was bad. Like, the links that I was getting were just terrible. And, like, 'cause I'm often looking for confirmation of something I know, or I think I know. So I'm like, oh, what date was the iPad? Was that 2009 or 2010? 2010. But like, just stupid little things like that, or how to accomplish some task, which again, I'm pretty sure. And so I'd get the result, and I'd look through the steps, and I go, well, that can't be right, and maybe it was just out of date. Maybe it was just wrong. I mean, there was a whole lot of wrong out there. And so, so I just became disillusioned with, like, internet content. It was taking me more and more time to find stuff.
Did you find you were having to do more work to try to tailor your query to try to get it to give you the right answer?
No, it was more that I had to. I mean, like, the text
just still wrong?
It was just wrong. And part of it was, I mean, we all get this feeling, right? Or maybe we don't, but you go to a website, you've never heard of it before. It's got, there's always a certain kind of design, and, like, the text is kind of big, and it doesn't really have a date, or it's always updated really recently. And you're just like, this is not a real website. Like,
That's
these people,
sketchy.
this is sketchy. I don't know where this is coming from. And and so there was a lot of that kind of stuff where I'm like, this isn't text from Macworld, or even the New York Times, or tech stuff, or blog, actual individuals. This is
Okay.
just this site,
Some
which, I
generated.
don't know, maybe it's Asian, or overseas somewhere. English isn't always quite right,
But somehow
but
it's rising in Google's rankings.
and Braves, like, like, it's all the text is there, so, like, I can see why,
Right.
but it's not good.
But it's supposed to be based on, at least Google was supposed to be based on how many people linked to it. That was the original algorithm, right?
I think that's a long time ago now.
Oh, I'm disillusioned.
I think PageRank, that was what PageRank was.
Yeah.
And I think the Google algorithm is much, much, much more complicated now.
Sure.
And every time Google changes it, there is an incredible outcry because some people benefit and some people, lose.
Right.
One of the things one of the most recent changes, I don't know, a year or two ago, maybe a year ago, Google decided to reward user-generated content. And so the practical upshot of this is that Tidbits Talk gets about the same number of hits as Tidbits now.
Oh, interesting. Where Tidbits Talks is your discussion.
It's discussion
self-hosted. Right.
Yeah. Yep. And so, the content's all great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is wrong necessarily, but we all know that people don't always have the information right in forums. So partly because in Tidbits Talk, I think actually people do tend to the information in Tidbits Talk is often very good, except for the fact that there's always people asking questions because they don't know the answer.
Right. So it's not like, say, Stack Overflow, where the right answer has gotten a bunch of thumbs up that rank it and things like that.
There are ways
that I
don't know if Google can read that, but yeah, right, precisely. I don't have a way of anointing the right answer, and often there isn't quite that thing. There isn't a right answer. And and if someone says something which I believe is actively wrong, I will usually say, I really don't think that's the case, and here's why.
But that data's still in there.
Data's still in there because I'm not going to delete them because they were wrong.
But isn't this what all the AI engines have been trained on? Is the collective knowledge of the planet, which is perhaps below average?
Well, I suppose by definition it better be average, but I don't know. Maybe not.
A little jokey joke there.
I'm like, uh-oh, my math skills failing quickly. but seriously, it's an interesting problem, right? We want this. We sort of believe that there's this concept of correct information, and a search engine is all it's going to do is find you a page that contains information.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you to go to that page and read the whole thing, and determine where the information that answers your question is, if it's correct, and then and that may be the entire point of the page, or it may be a tiny little comment somewhere down, 30 people in the comments, right?
Okay. Right.
So this is the problem is these search engines in essence say, here's some stuff, go read it, you figure it out. And
so you're spending a lot of time.
That's all we had.
This isn't an efficient way to search.
Yes, and it's all we had, so we didn't complain, right? It was good. So, but fast forward to, as I say, sometime last year, and Perplexity appears. And Perplexity says, what if I do this search, I find 10 results, whatever, sort of traditional search methods, and then I, as an AI, read them and answer the question that was posed to me.
And read more than one.
Read all of them. I'm a computer. I can do that kind of stuff, right? Very quickly.
Right.
It's not as quick as Google, because Google's got to like return a build a page and return it, right? That's super fast. The AIs actually have to ingest the information, run it through a chat bot, with the query that you have posed to them. So again, it's not they're taking the information and they're synthesizing out what you specifically asked. So it's very different than a search in some ways, right?
Right. Well, yeah, it's a search, but it's asking a lot more people than one or two.
Right.
It's not picking what it thinks the best. It's aggregating the collective intelligence.
And the sources one of the interesting things is Perplexity linked to its sources. one of the problems very early on with the chatbots, so starting in October 2023 when ChatGPT hits, is they make stuff up. That they just have incorrect information. And some of that's because they were fed incorrect information in their models. Sometimes it's the way the statistical groupings work out that, incorrect things get put together. But we used to be, very early on, you could ask ChatGPT to, cite its sources, and it would make up URLs. Like, like it was just like, here's a perfectly reasonable looking URL. It doesn't go anywhere.
That's amazing.
But so what Perplexity did is it turned that whole model on its head and said, I'm actually literally going to do the search, and then I will assemble my answer out of the contents of those searches, and I will provide references to where I got those pieces of information. And so what's interesting is when you follow a link, which you can always do in Perplexity, to see where it got the information, sometimes you go, oh, well, that's sort of weird. Why did you link to this one? And it may be because it's getting like different portions of the answer from a page that is not primarily about your question.
Okay.
Right? Because again, sometimes the answer to your question is the 29th comment on some article.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this article, like, why did you link to this? Oh, well, because down here, right, this little bit here is what actually answers your question.
You get real good at Command F to look for the search term you asked for.
You can do, yeah. I mean, you can do some of that if you really want to trace it down. But what I found was that first Perplexity I had used for a while, and then ChatGPT added web search. And then, it's sort of the floodgates opened, and Google came out with it's Google AI mode, which is a Search Labs feature. So it's not the Google AI that you see at the top of the normal Google search, but it's a chatty one. It's a chatbot based kind of AI.
What's the difference?
It doesn't show you the list of links primarily. So it links to them, but they're sort of off in a sidebar.
This is where I'm a little confused on this whole idea of searching versus talking to. How do I tell any of these systems I want to do a web search versus what it's normally doing, which is creating an answer?
So, well, and just to say that Claude also, towards the end of this added this feature as well. So the two big bots, ChatGPT and Claude, and then Perplexity has long done it. So those are the big three, and then Google had this Search Labs thing. So to answer your question, though, they usually just Perplexity, everything is a search.
Okay.
Unless you ask but Perplexity, I shouldn't say that. It is possible to do something in Perplexity that it will not create a search from because it does have an LLM behind it.
Okay, so I could ask maybe all of these, rewrite this sentence for me.
Yes.
And that would not be a web search. But if I say, when was the iPad introduced, they will automatically do a web search.
Well, so that's the question. So Perplexity will.
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT usually will. And Claude usually won't.
Okay.
And so just earlier today, in fact, in fact, I was a friend of mine was asking, what the relationship was between the Syracuse Chargers and the Syracuse Track Club, which are two running clubs in Syracuse nearby. And he said, "Oh, it looks like the track club is like a subgroup of the Chargers." So I'm like, "No, that's totally not true." I mean, I know this fact. But he showed me the what Google's summary response. It just completely got it wrong. And I asked ChatGPT the same question. It got it wrong without doing a web search. And then when I said, "You've gotten it wrong. Search for this information," it recanted completely and gave me the correct answer.
I do find it interesting.
So basically,
how all
the training
of these,
model.
When you tell it it's wrong, I'm going to start when it tells me the right answer, telling it it's wrong to see if it still says, "Oh, my bad," because it always does.
It probably will. It will be an interesting question. I have done that a couple of times. Where I've asked it a question that I knew I said, is it true that XYZ? and they each time when I say something, is the sky green or something, they're like, no, it's not.
Oh, good.
So
Oh, good,
they
good.
don't always agree with you, but it would be interesting if it was questionable.
So
But the point being that usually ChatGPT is pretty good at interpreting what you write and deciding whether it needs to do a search or it can just answer it from its training model.
I asked Perplexity while we're talking, when was the iPad introduced? It gave me 9 sources that told me it to, and then spit out the answer with little bullets telling me which one I could link to. Great. I
Mhm.
asked, Claude the same question, and it said, "I believe the original iPad was introduced in 2010." But then I said, "Okay, search the web to tell me when the iPad was introduced and show me your source." And it's been spinning ever since I wrote that. It hasn't answered the question. And, when I asked ChatGPT the same question, it simply gave me the answer with no result. So I'm not getting a search result. It's not a search. There must be some way to actively tell it search versus
So so when was the I have this clever little iPad released. I created this keyboard maestro macro
nice.
that does sends the same query to all four engines
Oh, nice.
um, in different split panes in um, in Arc, which can open four split panes at
Oh,
once.
nice.
And so I can do that. Sometimes fails on the fourth one. Um, so for me anyway, with ChatGPT, keep in mind I do have a Plus account for ChatGPT. I
Mhm.
don't know if that
I
helps
do too.
encourage it to search.
The $20,
Um,
not the $200 one.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's ridiculous. Um, basically, it did a search. Uh,
It just
ChatGPT did
ChatGPT just
not.
gave me the
Or
answer.
sorry, Claude did not. ChatGPT did.
I didn't, when I asked it, it just gave me the answer. It didn't give me anything. I did stop Claude from spinning, trying to answer my question of do a web search. So, and I stopped it, and then I said, "Was that a hard question?" And then it gave me the web search version, where I've got a link to the to where the sources are. So it sounds like it decides on the fly whether or not it wants to do a web search or not.
Yes. Um,
You're not
my
specifically saying do a
experience
web search in your query. That's the question I'm asking.
no, I am not. Although I said I've had to force Claude to do that a few times.
Hmm.
Um, my experience is that if you ask questions that involve that feel like there's details in them, it will usually do it. They'll mostly do searches.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and and but you can always say do a search.
Okay.
Kind of like, why didn't you search? Search for this information, or
Okay.
give me references. So that's
Okay.
sometimes if it does it, I was like, I want references for that,
Sounds like I need
and then
a,
it will.
text expander snippet to start my my queries when I want to do that. You answered my main question was: is there like a different tab I'm supposed to be on in these, or is there a
No,
setting where I can tell it? It's you have to
there is not,
sometimes instruct it
and
to do it, except for
and I will
perplexity.
say partly I say that it's not really an issue. I mean, I was somewhat taken aback because I'm like, oh no, just do it, because I've had first Perplexity and then ChatGPT set as my default search engine, and for a long time, and that's not a problem I've run into.
Okay. Yeah, it looks
Like,
like perplexity's doing it automatically.
I mean, Perplexity certainly, but ChatGPT, same thing. Only very infrequently does it not do a web search, whereas Claude repeatedly needs to be told to do it. And
Okay.
Claude is I mean, they're the newest to add the web search, and I think the weakest overall. But uh, eh, there's I think Anthropic's just not. I mean, it may just be early, right?
Anthropic
But
is
they
the
may
makers
be
of Claude.
It's of Claude.
Okay.
Sorry, yes. They may simply not be wanting to emphasize that at the moment yet.
Okay. Okay. So, in a generic sense, you talk in your article about search engines versus answer engines. And why do you find the answer engines a better way to go?
Quite simply because I want the answer. I mean, literally, if I'm asking a question, I want the answer. I don't want to be given homework,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
right?
And
I got stuff to do in my life, and I'm asking a question because I want the answer, and if I need to go and do research to get the answer, it just takes a lot more time and clutters up my brain with information I don't need.
you listed 4 separate bullet points that I wanna go or at least list here because I think they're really well thought out. You said it comparing a search engine to an answer engine, it goes from lists to synthesis. So a list is just here's all the things you gotta go look at and read and figure out, and synthesis is it just puts it together to answer the question. From keywords to natural language, that one's really big. So you're not having to put quotes around things and try to guess how it wants it to be written. You could just write it in natural language and get the answer. Um,
Right.
from isolated lookups to conversations, that's the biggest thing is it's not 10-minute Tom or 10-second Tom in 50 First Dates. Instead, you're able to have a conversation. Like if it gets it slightly off or like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm sorry. I wanted that answer for, Hindenburg on the Mac, not on the PC." And it'll go, "Oh, okay, no problem. I'll give you that answer." And then finally, from raw results to smart summaries, and it's that summary level where you start, and then you go, "Okay, let me look at the source to make sure that's a valid source, and did it really say what you told me?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, basically, I mean, there's an evolution here, right? And I mean, most people probably don't remember the things I started the article with in terms of Archie, which was searching for FTP sites, and Veronica, Jughead and Veronica were searching Gopher servers.
Great
But
names.
they could just search file names, like that was all they could search on. And so when we got into being able to do full text search with Alta Vista, and then Yahoo building these directories, like the concept or sort of the approaches for how we look for and acquire information have been evolving on
Sure.
the internet.
Right,
And we've
right.
been kind of stuck at the search engine approach for a while, although even Google for many years now realized that people don't want to do homework. So if you search on, the weather or flight arrival times or things like that, Google will just give you the answer,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't
Right.
make you go somewhere else. And this was a big deal. I mean, we don't think about it now, but boy, the companies that put out that information who were getting tons of search hits from Google, they were really mad that Google
Yeah.
stole all their traffic.
Right, right.
Um, and but
It's a
I
funny
think
thing.
this
I'm
was
sympathetic to them, and yet I just want the answer.
this is the problem. I mean, this is the real tension, is that what's good for the user is not necessarily what's good for the provider of the information.
Yeah, and you end your article with talking about that a little bit and about the evolution of technologies over time. This is what happens. But I think
Yep.
it's a little bit different in this case because these tools are training on the content that's been created by separate websites and individual humans and corporations, and if they're disincentivized to create that content, then all of the answer engines are gonna get stupider, right?
Well, the question is, who will be disincentivized and why?
Mhm.
And we assume we only think about, oh, the New York Times, the Washington Post, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, do you do what you do because you're going to earn money every time someone reads it? Or do you do it because you want to create this information?
I'm in a lucky position that I can afford to do it for the love of the craft. That I don't have to feed my family based on it, but there's a lot of people who do feed their families based on what they create.
Well, and for 35 years, I've been creating tidbits. But you know what? I don't earn money based on the specific text I write. I earn money by creating value for people.
Right.
And
Okay.
and
Okay.
so so that I mean, and at this point, I mean, we started advertising on the internet. We did the first advertising on the internet
Mhm.
in 1992. And I'm a little sorry. Like, probably would have happened
I
anyway,
apologize.
uh, but I think advertising is a scourge. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Um, and no one likes it. At best, we put up with it because we understand it's how many of these companies make money.
Mhm.
But it's not good. It's exploitive. I mean, it's not saying, I have provided something of value to you. Now let me suck your eyeballs out. It's not
With a
like,
foot
it's not
fungus
like,
ad.
right, precisely, belly fat ad. Like,
Oh my god, the 2 of
yeah.
those, that's the 2 worst on the internet. Make it stop.
Yeah. So, like, and we were talking earlier, sort of the rise of email newsletters in the last, 5 years or so. Well, part of that is because you can actually get people who value what you write and are willing to pay you for that information.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and and so it's a different business model. I mean, basically business models change all the time. And the internet advertising model that we were so used to, I mean, the click-through rate on ads is something like, last I looked, which is now a couple of years out of date, so it's probably gone down by a lot. Something like 0.8%,
Mm,
0.1%, I don't forget exactly. It's incredibly low. People
right.
don't do this. They don't want these things. And yet we've got enough scale that you can still earn enough money at this for this model to keep existing. So in that sense, I just don't have much sympathy. Like, models change. The buggy whip manufacturers are unhappy. The classified ad people who did newspapers, they're unhappy. The internet ate them. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, and
Eh,
another thing to think about, especially in the context of what Tidbits creates, and I will sit behind you as your little sister going, me too," um, is that if you're creating content that hasn't been written before, I think there's
yes,
still a place for it. So the example, I did a conversation with Bart about, Stack Overflow, and, someone did a study of Stack Overflow and how the number of answers has plummeted since ChatGPT started. However, what they sort of came to the conclusion was the answers are already there. Like, somebody's asked this 300 times. Like, most of the links are already asked and answered here, already asked and answered here, already asked and answered here. But the languages that are new, they're still getting just as much traffic and answers, and people are discussing it.
yes,
But JavaScript hasn't changed that much lately. I mean, maybe ES6, you're all excited there's a new flurry of information about it, but the answers asked and answered, we don't need to write it again.
yep.
And for ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude to have swallowed that up and regurgitate it for you more quickly than you can find the answer over on Stack Overflow, I think that's fine. But if you're generating new content, new ideas, what you're talking about is something that hasn't already been regurgitated, I think that's where the value might be.
And if you think about it, also, again, we have this kind of, live in a capitalist society, this concept that, you have to sell your content. But in fact, vast amounts of content is not created with any sort of profit motive in mind at all. I
Mm.
mean, people aren't posting to Tibbetts Talk because they expect to get paid for it. There's people there who are just answering questions
They
with
like to
great
share their
information
knowledge.
to share their knowledge. I mean, most of academia not really do it. But when professors publish books, they're really not expecting to earn any money. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way most of the time. Papers, scientific papers, same thing. The authors don't earn any darn squat. The journals might earn a lot,
Right,
but
right.
that's a different problem. Government information, vast swaths of information coming out of the government at all times without the words climate change in them anywhere now. So, it's, I mean, that's where, a vast amount of this data comes from is, nonprofit, just non-commercial sources. And that's fine too. So like, that's why, we talked a little about this last time, this concept of these large language models as cultural and social technologies, because they allow people to engage with information created by other people.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's a
Yeah.
medium of the chatbot, but there was a medium with Wikipedia or with Google or with writing. I mean, they're all cultural technologies. And so it's a way of communicating information from one person or many people to someone else. And um, so there's no question that the business models are going to change surrounding this. They kind of have to. But I think it's in the service of doing better stuff for people. Like, again, You want the answer. You don't want homework.
Now, you talk in your article also about procedural differences between searches and answers. I think most of us have a lot of experience with asking Google for the answer to something. But how is it different with the answer engines? How do you approach it differently in terms of procedure?
Well, so with Google, we become so accustomed to it, we don't even really think about how we do it. But those who do a lot of searches, anyway, we've just kind of built in this concept of distilling what our question will be to the most likely keywords that are going to hit what we want.
Right.
And you do that because there's no point in adding the other words in; they're not going to be used anyway. The keywords are all that matter to Google. However, with the answer engines, you don't want to do that because how you ask the question and how you phrase it will change how it responds. So I'm trying to think of a good example here. If you could very easily ask, I guess what I'm saying is you could very easily ask two different questions that use many of the same keywords, but the question would be different. And an answer engine would understand that because they're very good at that kind of context and give you what you're asking for rather than the pages that might have your relevant keywords, regardless of whether they agree with you or support what you're trying to get or not. And part of the issue here is that keywords have to be uncommon. So, I mean, Apple's the worst here, right?
Oh,
We've got apps called
shoot me now.
Photos and
Book.
Mail. Books.
Yeah.
Just the worst.
Trying to figure out how to do
calendar.
anything in books to publish content. Yeah, sorry, you're not gonna get the answer.
Right. But on the other hand, with Google, you'd put in Apple Books, or
Right.
something along those lines. But with
But then put quotes around it in
Chat,
case it looks for Apple and books. You gotta put quotes on either
yep,
side.
precisely. Whereas with the answer engine, you might say, um, I'm trying to figure out what is the best app to create an ebook for sale in Apple Books.
Mhm.
And I haven't tested that particular one, but I'm willing to bet that it will answer that pretty effectively because, words like app, not really very useful. Create, pretty blah, blah, blah. So the
Right.
Apple Books, again, you'd have to quote it normally, et cetera, et cetera. But this is going to find stuff that's talking about publishing, creating and publishing these, and then it's going to synthesize that into some kind of an answer that will either just answer your question or it will at least give you somewhere else to go with it, which might be just a follow up of, oh no, and I don't want to use pages.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
well, now
Now you're
then,
gonna get a different answer. Right.
yeah, good luck now. But I used to use iTunes Publisher, but that's no longer available. What is recommended now?
Right, right,
You
but you
know,
could be having that conversation with it as you're
right.
going through instead of having to figure out how to put a minus sign in front of Apple Pages, 'cause you can't just put minus pages, so you gotta
Precisely. So I think that so there's a little bit of you have to think about what you want.
Mhm.
It's really that it's not there. I feel like in some sense with searching, we don't think as tightly because you can sort of refine what you're looking for as you scroll through each of the result pages that you've decided to read,
Mhm.
right? You're almost you can put off that question about what you want. It's like, oh no, that's not it, and then you have to go do another search because
Right,
it's not
right.
finding the sort of things you want. Whereas this, I think a few more seconds of upfront thought about what you're actually asking is useful. Um, and then, again, either refining or expanding within the same conversation so that you don't have to just start over
Right.
from scratch.
I'd
You're
like
like,
people to consider
directing it.
yeah, I'd like people to consider, This audience is the nerd audience who gets the questions from their friends, or they go on vacation and everybody on the trip figures out that you know stuff, and then you get a little line out the door asking you how to play with their iPhones. But people will always come to you and say things like, macOS hates me. Can you elaborate a little bit? And so you have to keep drawing out that information from people. So now imagine you're on the other side. You're the one asking the question, and you go in and you ask it. Hindenburg, again, is an application I use on the Mac, but it's got a bigger audience on Windows. So I'll tend to say, how do I do this in Hindenburg? And it'll say, give me an answer, and it'll say things like Control P. I realize, oh, I need to elaborate more. So this person that I'm asking for help needs more information from me. I need to give it more descriptive. It's very rare that I ask the right question to start with. I very often have to give it more information. But there's also a piece of where it gives an answer that isn't, I'm not sure what flavor of wrong you put this in, what category you call it, but like I'll be asking it, is there a way to do auto ducking in Hindenburg? And it'll say, absolutely, you do it like this. And I say, don't see those menus. And I say, oh, I'm on the Mac. It says, oh, well, you should use these menus. And I said, I don't see those menus. And it'll come back and go, yeah, it doesn't have auto ducking. That's a conversation I had. Well, okay, you could have told me that the first time. Why did you tell me it did have that capability? And so it's not perfect.
And that's a question, actually, that I would wonder if it was that actually being a search, or was that coming from the model?
I don't remember ever seeing like links to the sources.
Right. Because my, just kind of anecdotal experience with some of the stuff that's often wrong is that the wrong stuff tends to come from the model.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I would think so.
The models are out of date. And also there's a lot more in the model. I mean, when you say you're going to do a search and you're going to find these 10 pages, that's relatively constrained space, right? So if the answer is in that space, it's probably going to get it right.
Yeah. This is a tool that isn't documented, by the way, except in little videos. Every answer to every question is a video, so there's no way to find the answers by searching, because I started there.
Yeah, I'm going to be really curious to see when. I mean, obviously, we do get video links from all the search engines and answer engines at this point. But I'm going to be I don't know to what extent they are extracting the full text of what's said and basing it on that. That would be really interesting.
That would be fun. Yeah.
So the one thing I will say that's kind of, I find, one reason why I'm doing this is kind of fun, is the whole AI space is moving so freaking fast. and so, something like, oh yes, we've now transcribed every YouTube video, every video that we can find, we've transcribed and built in, wouldn't be surprised, and so now we can now do full text search. And Google's probably done this already.
Yeah, I mean, because we started 43 minutes ago, so they're probably done with it by now. Right? Since we started.
Right, precisely. But so, so because I same thing, like I find being sent to YouTube videos, unless I'm looking for literally a video about how to perform some physical action, I hate videos, just hate them. Because I read so much faster.
Right, and I can jump to what I want to know. I mean, it literally, if you're trying to look for what kind of tool do I need to get a hold of this valve on the back of my sink? Okay, that's where video is real handy. I want to see it.
Right. Anything else drives me up the wall, because it's like a 20-minute video. You guys, you got to be kidding. I am not watching a 20-minute video to find out that they didn't answer my question anyway.
A lot of times they have they start at a certain point where the answer might be, but a lot of times that's not true. Yeah. One of the other big values I saw in your article was you went through choosing an answer engine, and you gave you did 4: Perplexity, ChatGPT, more than that. Perplexity, ChatGPT, Google AI Mode, U.com, and Claude. And you gave the pricing. But the other thing you gave me, which I'm going to feed into a tip back to you, is you gave the search URL for each one. So like perplexity.ai/search Q equals %S. I use a tool called Keyword Search, and I wrote an article about it that I'll link in the show notes. It's a plugin for Safari that allows you to create essentially like a text expander snippet for how to search a different site. So in order to search podfeed.com, I type SP space and whatever I want to search for, and it's doing a Google search into my website. So I immediately used all of these. I created one called SPerp for search perplexity, and now I can search perplexity from the web with just two characters.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's why I did it. The Chrome, in Chrome, you can just that sort of thing's built in terms of
I thought you said it
little,
was an extension. No?
For Safari, you need it, but for Chrome, you can, when you define a search engine, you can define a shortcut key.
But you have to define that search. You have to always be using that search engine, or can it do it on the fly based on what you put beforehand?
You can do as many as you want.
Okay.
So like I have Amazon set, so if I type a space, it'll do an Amazon search.
Okay. So this isn't really a search engine. It's using something to search that site, or the search built into
basically
that
it's
site.
just directing a search to a specific service.
Yeah, you talked about one called customized search engine.
Right. So what I was going with customized search engine is that makes it the default, because I find that I don't actually usually want to search other ones often enough that it's worth doing that. There's very few. Basically, Amazon, Wikipedia.
Do you ever search Tidbits?
I do, but I'm actually on the Tidbits site most of the time. I have Tidbits in a pinned tab in Arc, so I don't tend to do.
And you have
that.
a good search. Because I have a terrible search on mine.
Yeah,
which is why I use Google to search podfeed.com.
Yeah, the search I've got on Tidbits is pretty good. I think it's based on Jetpack.
Okay, actually, I forgot. Yeah. I did fix search on podfeed.com. I think it's actually doing it correctly now. I shouldn't downplay that. Tell you not to use it.
So for me, I just want to do basically the equivalent of the location bar, as I want my default search to just work. And so that's what's hard to do in Safari. I mean, Apple does not make it easy, mess with these things in Safari. You have to have an extension, and the same with Firefox. Although someone told me there's actually something in Firefox really deep in the settings, like the command line settings, that you can make it so you can edit the search engines in Firefox too. But I find that annoying. I was like, let me check out my own damn search engine.
I'm going to check out customized search engine for Safari. That would be interesting to switch it for a while. By the way, Bart just did an article last week on the NoCellicast about Kagi, is what he uses for search. That's where you pay with your dollars instead of your eyeballs. And he's actually been using it for well over a year, so it's stuck as a good one.
I've heard very nice things about Kagi. And I think they've got something called Kagi Assistant, which is this kind of AI answer thing as well too. But it just sort of falls into the category of yet another thing that I would have to pay for, which I didn't have to, so I didn't.
Yeah, and it's a search engine, not by default. It isn't an AI.
Right. I mean, what I find kind of interesting, Perplexity. The difference between Perplexity and ChatGPT, which are by far my most functional ones, because as I said, what I did in the article was I ran the same search across 4 of them at once and then actually rated them. And so I was able to get, just a simple average of like how successful was this. And ChatGPT and Perplexity were the best 2 by far. But I've slightly preferred ChatGPT because Perplexity, as much as you can continue a conversation, it's a little bit, it's less conversational. ChatGPT really is, which is more conversational in some way that I somehow prefer that. I can't quite
just feels
say why. Yeah, it just feels somewhere, like, oh yeah. And so it's common for me now in Arc to open a split view of 2 things, what I'm writing, and then a conversation with ChatGPT and the other split view.
That's cool.
So that I can talk about the topic with ChatGPT while I'm writing, which in essence is a search, right?
Right.
But it's a search that has been informed by the entire conversation we've been having, rather than, again, these one-off searches.
Starting over. Yeah, so you assigned the arbitrary Adam Angst scale of 1 to 4, I think.
Yes.
And then
0
scientifically,
to 3, yes.
1 to 3, 0 to 3. Sorry.
Because I wanted 0 to be like, you just got it wrong. Like you
Yeah.
completely
No.
biffed this.
Just no.
You mean like you're not even in the ballpark. And then 3 is that answer is completely on topic. Like you got everything right. I can't argue with it. And then 1 and 2 are well, you kind of got the answer
Good
right,
effort.
but there was a bunch of other stuff that was wrong. That might be a 1. And 2 might be, you got the answer right, but you didn't explain it very well.
You made it
Or,
too hard.
like
Too much work for me.
you made it too much work, or just like you didn't say very much, so that, like
Okay.
there could have been, like when I compare what this answer engine said to this one, they did a better job. Like I'm just happier reading
Okay.
this.
Okay. So you ran all 4 search engines at the same time, right? Or
Yep.
answer engines, and you
Yeah.
assigned. How many questions did you ask?
Well, that's a good question. What am I at? I kept it up because it's kind of
We're going to
fun.
need to see the spreadsheet. We're going to need to see your
Yeah,
math.
it's linked in the article. So, I have now 47, I think. Nope, 46.
Oh,
Questions.
you did put it in the. Look at that. There's a Google sheet.
Yeah, you can see what I search on.
I'm going to check your math too and make sure you did. Oh no, it's not going to. It's read only.
Oh man, I hope I got it right. It's just an
No.
average.
Actually, averages are harder than you think. I'm going to tell an anecdote that has nothing to do with the entire topic here today, but I was running a 360 survey for all my employees. So they had people, their peers, who would answer questions about them, about their performance. So I had to be the only one who could see the data because I didn't want anybody to know who had scored who what. So I had this spreadsheet and I was doing averages and I was getting the wrong answer. Like somebody would get a 3 from one person, a 2 from the other person, and the average would not be 2.5. And I'll never forget this. I asked this woman, Darlene, who worked for me, I said, okay, I can't let you see any of the data, but this is what's happening. And she goes, oh, somebody probably hit the space bar accidentally, and the value of space is 8. What? How do you know that? How did you figure that out from the little bit of information I gave you? And I went through and I cleared out everything else in the column that looked empty. And sure enough, that's what the problem was. So it's real easy to get the average wrong.
Yeah. Well, in this case, I also did want this is like 0 to be different from null.
Yeah. Good.
So null doesn't get included, but 0 does. That kind of thing.
Okay.
But yeah. So I mean, you can see, like most of my questions, they're real questions. Is there a faster way of printing a page from Canva than going through the whole share, download PDF, pick a page, download, open PDF, print dance?
So you were just running this while you asked questions that you really needed to know.
Yeah, right. I needed to know that.
Now,
and,
how come?
And keep in mind, the answer, I don't always win, right? Like the answer to that was no. There is not a way.
But that's the answer.
That was the answer. And like that one, that was back when I was using you.com. And so everyone but Google got that one completely right. And Google completely biffed it. Like just totally wrong. So, it was 3303 for in the scoring for the 4 judges in that one.
Now, I know that
they do vary somewhat.
You've showed that Claude did the worst, but to be fair, Claude only has about a third the number of questions it was asked.
And that's why
it might not be
that.
fair.
It might not be, but it's pretty universally doing badly. Every time I compare it, just about. I mean, if you look, it's only gotten the answer right about a third of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but not as many.
And it's gotten a couple of real failures.
Not a fair comparison.
So as I said, I was clear about this. Do not have as much data about Claude yet. But the real problem with Claude is it's annoying as all get out to work. So the way this works is it opens a tab with this URL, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can build. So when you do that with Claude, it has to prompt you to ask if you mean to send it this prompt.
So I tried it and it wasn't that. I just had to push the button when I did it.
So when I do this, I get this, like you have to approve the prompt, and then I have to go and click on the send button. So it requires 2 clicks for everything in my Arc specific, keyboard maestro macro setup thing. And so I was just like, oh, you're just irritating beyond belief every time.
In Perplexity, I had to click away. No, I don't want to log in.
Oh, I guess I'm logged in.
Must be logged
So
in,
one
yeah.
thing I didn't mention, actually, that's an interesting point. So one thing I didn't mention, and I think Claude will do it. I haven't actually checked in Claude as much because I haven't been using Claude as much. But both ChatGPT and Perplexity maintain a library of all of your
Oh, yeah,
queries,
Claude does too. It's fantastic. But you have to be
which is
logged in. Yeah.
searchable.
Yeah.
Right, you have to be logged in,
Yeah.
but it's searchable. And so there are times when I will think, I need this information which I have asked for in the past and gotten. Rather than
Right.
do another search, is what you would do with Google or the like,
Well,
I will search my library.
it can also do more than that, and this is how I figured out that it was really keeping this on me, is I asked it a question and it said, "Well, you have Keyboard Maestro on your Mac, why don't you just use that?" It was like,
Dummy.
"How do you
Right.
know that?" And it said, "Well, you told me, stupid." It didn't say stupid, but it told me, it said, "You asked me a question about it. You already told me you have it." I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
look at that. Look at what it knows."
Yeah.
Be careful
Yeah.
what you tell it.
So right. Yeah. So yeah, there is a little bit of that. You probably don't want to tell your deepest, darkest secrets to these things, just in
Yeah.
general. Then
Yeah.
again, you shouldn't type your deepest, darkest secrets to
Anybody.
anything. Even putting it on your computer is probably a little on the stupid side. Just saying.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that I find that library actually quite helpful. At least ChatGPT has the concept of a temporary search, which does not trigger the library.
Oh,
So if you
interesting.
did want to do something that didn't get saved for some reason, you could do that. And there are probably a few searches that I have not put through my in my spreadsheet here because people didn't need to know.
What's that rash about? How's
Yeah.
that fungus
Right.
coming
Look at
along?
this picture. No. But yeah, so I mean, it's it is interesting to go through this and see, again, where some of these things come from, and how they do, and is that it's not 100%. It's not like they are all just 100% comparable, and
Right, right.
sometimes yes, sometimes no.
I think this is a great resource, and I'm definitely going to refer back to the article, which, of course, again, will be linked in the show notes. And I'm not going to give you the link to his Google spreadsheet because I want you to go read his article. What I find fascinating is this has been up since the 18th, I think it was. And today's
Yeah.
the 23rd, and more than half of the page is people commenting back to you in Tidbits Talk. So those are embedded in his web pages, but it's also part of Tidbits Talk. And so you're getting a lot of people interested in this topic and getting a lot of great discussion. So that's really fun.
And this was a 4,000 word article to start with, so
Yeah. Yeah.
this was not an easy article to write.
You used up a lot of ink.
Yeah, so I mean, it is, and people on the whole, I was curious how it was going to be received, and I think people actually are more open to it, or have already been using these things more than I had anticipated, which I was kind of pleased about.
Yeah.
This was not, it was not quite as radical a concept as I had feared it might be.
Yeah, that makes me think, I do a lot of user group talks, and I haven't done any user group talks where I talk about AI, 'cause there we were discussing, I think it was offline, about maybe it wasn't, the age demographic and,
yeah.
of our audience, and, user groups tend to be definitely pitch older, and I'm very curious to see whether they're, terrified, running away, or they think it's awesome sauce. That'd be a fun discussion to do.
You never know. I mean, my father-in-law, who is technical, he was a systems architect at NCR for many years, various spin-offs of NCR over the years, Teradata and whatnot. But he was a fairly early user of Perplexity. He was using it last summer, after I
Okay.
told him about it at some point. He's like, "This is great. I love this." And currently, he and some other guy at the retirement community where they're living are building this honkin' database of I'm not even sure of what. I think it's a residence and stuff like blah blah blah, in Google Sheets, with the whole thing being managed via app scripts. So it's a ton of
Okay.
JavaScript programming in Google stuff,
Nice.
which, I mean, he's done programming, but he's never used this, and so he's using ChatGPT heavily
To learn how to do it.
to build this stuff. And so
He
I'm like,
might
well,
not be
power to you.
mainstream. I'm just saying, he's one of us.
Yeah, he's one of us, but nonetheless, I was still, like, okay, this is clearly, not doesn't just, yeah, you don't know. But again, I think it's going to be interesting. You notice we're not seeing anyone adding these things to the default search engine menus. You
Mm.
know,
Well, that's
and
because 'cause they're
you
not being
know,
paid to do it, Adam.
well, yeah, because there's $20 billion on Apple's balance sheet that's coming from Google every year. And
Exactly.
Google's making 175 billion out of Google search and et cetera, et cetera. Mozilla only makes like 550 million, but Mozilla's small potatoes, so that's still most of their budget.
Yeah, we'll
So
see when
no,
they
search
let us
is
start
search is
doing
big
that.
business, and that's part of it is that with these things, you're not being fed ads. You're mostly paying for it if you want it.
Yeah.
Perplexity you can get for free, and they've got these sponsored questions, which I find a little weird, but like I hadn't even noticed they were there until I was researching it, honestly.
Interesting, yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't
so,
know how effective that'll be for them.
Adam's got all the prices, he's got the search, query search, he's got all of the data, and, it's a fantastic article. It did take me a while to pour all the way through it, but I was riveted through the whole thing, so I think everybody else will be.
How does it
Is
come out? How does it come out? The
Yeah.
butler did it.
What's the ending story? Well, if, is there anything else we've maybe missed on this?
I don't think so. This is it was a really interesting exercise, and I sort of have to decide whether how much longer I want to keep going with what I've been calling quad search. Running all my searches through this. But I guess one of the things that I just want to say is that it's worth trying a couple of them.
Mhm, sure.
To the extent that price isn't an issue. Um, and this is my sort of next area of research a little bit is that why do you like one model over another?
Hmm.
I don't know. Like what is it
What
that
is that
makes
gut that you
people
said?
prefer Claude over ChatGPT or ChatGPT 4.0 over ChatGPT 4.5? Like I don't know. And I don't know what the answer to that is, and I don't know how you find out because there's
Or
all
measure?
there's all these benchmarks, but benchmarks are sort of wrong, because this is an interaction, and although you're not interacting with a person, it's much closer to that.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a
like,
more
I
intimate
don't
conversation.
I don't measure our conversation and go, "Well, Allison scored, a 3 on the conversation here, but down here, she was only a 2, and we disagreed about that point, so 0 on that one," and then "Oh, well, Allison's average for this conference." You don't do that with people, right? You
I
you
hope not.
decide whether or not you trust them and you like them and you enjoy them, and to the extent that that's true, you wanna talk to them more. And I think the
Yeah,
same is true of the chatbots.
yeah. That'll be interesting to see where you go with that. That's pretty
Yeah.
fun.
And I've got
Alright,
a way
well,
of I've got a theory for how the chatbots are gonna help me build this too. It's gonna be a tool.
ask him which
No
one's
promises
best.
until I get it
Oh,
done.
the only other thing, have you published your, Keyboard Maestro macro that does this quad search?
Oh, I have not. If anyone wanted it, they could have it.
That'd be fun to see.
It's not it's not terribly difficult, but
Well, we
it,
don't need to do it real time, but if you felt like sharing that with me, that
yeah.
would be cool.
Yeah, I will share it. The only tricky part of it was, like, I'm not very good at, like, shell scripting, but it turns out, like, the best way to get a single string into Keyboard Maestro that then you work with was a shell
A shell
script,
script. Sure.
and,
And then
and
you just have the engines do it for you.
right, and ChatGPT wrote the shell script for me, which was, blah, 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 bin bash C, Python 3, C, import lib parse, blah, 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 no clue. No clue at all. But it wrote it for me for Keyboard Maestro. Like,
Right.
because again, Keyboard
Right.
Maestro has a fabulous discourse discussion forum where, I mean, people on the Keyboard Maestro forum
Oh, it's the
they're
best form.
astonishing.
It's the best form ever. Yeah, absolutely. But that's why
Just amazing.
your tools know the answer. I've asked a lot of questions about Keyboard Maestro because why should I bother trying to figure it out? Because I could get the answer in 5 seconds from one of the engines. All right, Adam,
Precisely. And so
I've got to cut us off.
that was the only trick there. So once I did that, the rest of it was pretty easy. And it's just like, monkeying through keyboard shortcuts and pauses and whatnot. So,
Yeah, pauses. That's always the killer.
but you got to use arc because otherwise you can't get 4 panes next to each other.
Ah, right, 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 right. All right, Adam, this was a blast as always. I always end up with smile muscle ache when I'm done talking to you. As always, only nerds could really enjoy this, but I had a lot of fun, and we'll talk to you probably in another month.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.